This is an exciting time. We've been talking about AI all morning, which is awesome. One big question is, how do we interface as human beings with AI? And what are good devices or a device ecosystem for us to use that intuitively? So this is the topic of this fireside chat. I'm Gordon Wettstein, Associate Professor of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science at Stanford. I work on physical AI, so bringing hardware together with artificial intelligence, and one of my topics is extended reality, XR. And I'm thrilled to be here this morning with Andrea Colasso. She's a director of human and AI interfaces on the XR team at Google. Andrea is responsible for the user interactable components of extended reality devices, ranging from natural input to more recent advances in agentic AI. Much like myself, she's been fascinated by XR and wearable technologies since the early days, whatever the early days are, really. Her core interests lie in novel ways of sensing human intent, beginning with gestures, continuing through a startup that was later acquired by Google, and evolving into ongoing work on human sensing technologies. Andrea has long viewed the XR space as a rich opportunity to help machines better understand humans, particularly from the vantage point of the human user. With the advent of large language models, she recognized a natural next step, leveraging XR's rich sensor inputs and immersive displays as an interface for AI. So in short, topic of this fireside chat is what devices provide a meaningful and seamless interface between generative AI and the human user. So now let me start with a personal anecdote. Andrea and I first met about 12 years ago at the MIT Media Lab when she was about to finish up her PhD and I was a postdoc. I remember her pitching her startup, 3Dim, at the MIT 100K. It's a startup competition at MIT, and they won, which was amazing. It was like a jaw-dropping moment for me when I realized that you could use just a few super low-cost sensors to detect human gestures. That startup was later acquired by Google, and you've been working on this for, well, more than 10 years now or so, right?
Yeah, close to 15, I guess.
All right.
We're both dating ourselves here.
So Andrea, you've been working at the frontier of human perception, XR, and AI for years. When you look at the current moment, what excites you the most about how multimodal and agentic AI are redefining how we interact with technology?
Great question. Frankly, I've never been more optimistic. As Gordon sort of pointed back to our early days, I've been in this wearable space of head-worn devices, and it's taken several forms: VR, MR, XR, various shapes that you wear on your head. And I was sort of drawn to this space even before Google Glass. So I was looking at these really monstrous things that you would wear on your face, and you bring yourself closer to a display. You have all kinds of egocentric sensing that's out there. And I think the question for me at that time, and even today, has been, how do you escape out of the boundaries that devices currently present to you when you're interacting with them? And so if you start with, I have this visual that I typically have in my mind, or I usually show out there, is of a keyboard and a mouse from, the 1968 when Doug Engelbart was working on it, to think about the fact that someone, took human dexterity and said, well, this is the best way for you to input into this machine. And that became our form, right? And so I feel like this entire past few decades has been getting humans to conform to the constraints that devices impose. And for the first time with AI, I sort of see this hope, and I see almost the convergence of many factors that are necessary to sort of almost get it to this place where you specify your intent in much like a natural way that you would with humans. So our gaze says a lot. Our tone says a lot. And all of this is like simply lost when you're interacting with a glass pane and you're simply using multi-touch, right? And so I feel like this is that moment beyond multi-touch when you start to see that AI is going to unlock these natural ways of interacting. And so if you sort of fast forward that and like, well, what are these ingredients that are really bringing out AI's capabilities today and in XR devices? I think you also have to look back a little bit. So I was doing this exercise while, sort of thinking through, well, what is it that really struck me about capturing humans naturally and having them interact with machines? It's this video from 1979. You can look it up. It came from the MIT's Tech Architecture Group. I see a few people nodding. It's called Put That There. And so in this video is my former thesis advisor. He's retired since, but he's sort of commandeering a really large screen, and he's saying, put that, yellow circle there and move that there. And you can see this vision where you want to instruct a machine with things like this and that, and to have that understanding that you were referring to this circle and not that one, and that you spatially wanted to position it in the real world, just like you might tell another human, let's move that table out there, right? I think that was setting that vision, and I remember watching that video when I first joined as like a really starry-eyed grad student, and being like, this is what I want to build, right? But the tech wasn't there, and today you're getting very, very close. With agents that you can talk to, you can almost refer to things like this and that, and it will get it. It will get it already. So now imagine how you bring these kinds of natural interactions into form factors that are equally rich into aspects. First is the sensing modalities, and second is the output. You want a rich output as well. And so the team I'm on, we currently work on a headset, which is fully immersive, beautiful, rich, crisp display, a plethora of sensors. There's a ton of world-facing sensors, maybe 15 or so of these. There's eye tracking sensors. There's sensors that can detect your natural gestures. And so you're bringing in a set of very rich input modalities that are available via the headset that we're working on, and you're giving the user an infinite canvas, and this is in the form of that rich display. So now what would the user expect to do? Surely organize their work, see, a multi-panel, multitasking environment. But at the same time, it's very tedious for a user to, at every single instance, want to pick and place every object in their world. But what if you could just say, place it out there next to this, next to my working panel in Chrome, right? Now that starts to bring out a level of sophistication in this interface that is to the user appears to be very simple, but in fact you have a large language model that's behind it that's actually supporting these kinds of interactions. So that would be my XR immersive style view of the world. But there's also a number of very lightweight form factors, like glasses. When you're wearing glasses, the real world is the canvas, right? It is the world you're in. And you want these rich outputs to now fade away into something that's very subtle, responding to the user only when you need it. So I'm out there, I'm on a hike, I want to be prompted that not to touch poison ivy, for instance, but I don't necessarily need a notification in my face, right? I don't need to know something unless it's super urgent, super time critical. So I think that's the second paradigm we'll see with the design of these interfaces is when do they intervene? How do you design them to be using the rich input modalities that you have at your disposal, but also being so helpful and so just in time that the user finds value at the right moments.
All right, great. Okay, so when we think about why is now the time for XR, we've seen Google Glass about 10 years ago and a couple of other generations, but different companies picking up this space. What I'm hearing is that these zero-shot capabilities of large generative models is what makes them really useful for humans to speak with, to help us understand the world, to give us a sense of anything we want without pre-programming it. Is that part of the equation? What's different now than before?
Yeah, honestly, I wouldn't be doing it justice if I said it was just AI,
Sure.
right? Because there's many different factors that come together that have brought all of these capabilities to be near real time. And so if you had AI capabilities that were available, but they took 10 seconds every time you asked them a question, well, how useful would that be, right? So I do want to give the necessary credit to all of the advances that have happened leading up to this moment in AI. And the major one I want to call out is actually hardware requirements, right? At the end of the day, you're interfacing with these devices through some amount of compute. And it wasn't until recently that you can see two capabilities that are emerging. The first is the Snapdragon's XR series of processors, right? Folks nodding, you're starting to see the power of the compute there. Getting miniaturized, right? You want them to be tiny enough that they fit in the form factor that you desire. You do not want them to overheat and cause some thermal constraints for you. And then you also want this interaction to be near real time, like I pointed out a few minutes earlier. You're also seeing from other ecosystem players like Apple, there's the R1 and the M1 series that are really showing the power of what can be possible with all of these sensors fusing online, right? And so I would say the hardware requirements plays a major role. The second one, and I touched upon this briefly earlier, was sensor fusion. There's only so much that large language models know, and it's largely in the form of text. But if you look at the types of rich sensors we have access to, like LiDAR, time of flight sensors, or event cams, or gaze sensors, this info is yet to make its way into the large model. And so sensor fusion happening on device is another capability that I see has really brought everything together in this iteration of AI on glasses and AI on wearables and AI on anything that is egocentric and head-worn. The third one I would say is context. Historically, context was something that was restricted to you and to the device you were currently working with, right? So if you had your workspace open in your laptop, that device had context about what work you were doing. If you had apps on your phone and there was a series of apps that you were using in quick succession, or you use them every morning, only your phone had this context. And I feel now we're sort of starting to say, well, what if I had a notion of apps on my fingertips and I could just say, book me that ride home. And now the model can start parsing that ride. It refers to some calendar event. I know that you prefer using a specific ride-sharing service, and it's available on your phone. So how do I connect that action for you is also the next step that I see as also unlocking huge potential for AI meets these advances and brings them to wearable devices.
All right, wonderful. Let's talk about user intent and multimodality. If we are talking about XR, it's a device that's sort of like seamlessly integrated with your eyewear, perhaps, or other wearables. You're not going to have a keyboard. You're not going to have a laptop display. The interfaces are very different. So I think there's a different demand on the AI to understand user intent to be helpful. So what modalities do we really need in order to understand user intent? And can you give us a sense of like what we even mean by user intent? What are we trying to understand about the user to build effective interfaces?
Yeah, that's frankly at the heart of when an agent is being helpful or not, is sort of, can you glean this next level of intent? And to me, it sort of has four key pillars. The first is context. The second is fusion. The third is some amount of prediction. And then the fourth is feedback. And once I said the top three, you might be thinking of, if you're an engineer, you might be thinking of inertial measurement unit, measurement systems and the EKFs and all the forward prediction. Well, yes, very much like that. You have some starting conditions which give you context. And within context, I sort of group these into three. There's the environmental context. So am I outdoors? Am I in a car? If I'm in a car, I should probably switch my modality to something that's hands-free. There's situational awareness. That's the second type of contextual information. This has to do with, I was in a meeting just now. I asked to book a meeting later. I'm likely referring to the same group of people. It also might have to do with sort of what kind of task are you accomplishing at the moment, what might be something that you're looking at. That's situational awareness. And the third one is personal context. For me, when I say the usual for coffee, I really want my agent to know what the usual means. But if every time it's asking you, well, how much sugar would you like this time? Like it's not being very helpful. It's not capturing that intent signal or that personal context that is converted into intent as well. So we talked about context. The second was fusion. There's all these signals that we are providing to the user. Some of them are, low bandwidth information that is, passive context, as we call it. There's also very high bandwidth information that the user is engaged with, and this has to do with, who are they talking to, or where is their gaze currently focused at? Like, gaze is considered to be, almost like the mouse cursor of your mind, if you will. It moves super quickly, but it sort of indicates where your focus and attention might be. So that's the second bit, fusing all of these signals. The third has to do with prediction. And this one is probably my personal favorite because I feel like suggested actions or getting them right can create that feedback loop with the user of delight where you want more. If I'm heading out and you sort of see that as a user, I'm transitioning outside of my house, you might want to say, well, pick an umbrella because it's likely going to rain where you're at. Or if you see I'm packing for a trip in London, it might remind you, well, it's going to be sunny. Have you considered carrying XYZ, right? So I feel like that prediction can create a lot of delight in these kinds of interfaces. And finally, there's feedback. A lot of people miss this, but I feel like with feedback, you have the opportunity to build trust with the user. Like the agent building trust with the user is very critical. And how you deliver this feedback, I think, can make a huge difference in how much a user grows to rely on the agent. So do you show a subtle chime? Do you have a little bit of an indicator which says, there's an incoming call that I kind of don't want to disturb you, but I want to let you know peripherally. So I feel like feedback, when done right, can actually be a very critical ingredient in this puzzle.
All right. So talking about agents, what role does the agent take? Is it your personal assistant? Is it your friend? Is it your, life organizer? How do you see this agent being most useful? Or are there multiple roles that these agents can play?
That's a very fascinating question. If you ask me, I feel the role of the agent is to build the relationship, right? To build a relationship with the user. And so if I were to summarize it, I would say the role is the relationship. To say that an agent is simply an assistant, I think would be sort of shoehorning it too much into like one area or one facet. And usually being associated with an agent being an assistant is sort of in tasks where, efficiency is key, or you're hitting repeat on a loop of things that you already know you need. But I do think there's many different roles an agent can have. As an assistant, like I said, the first one can be, of course, an assistant, one that is helpful, based on the task, is either able to complete the task almost nearly autonomously or with some feedback with the user. The second one could be that of a companion, right? You're working on something together, you're sharing your screen with an agent, it's sort of following along everything that you're doing, and suddenly it says, well, I think you missed this other document that I think you should have referenced in here. Well, wouldn't that be helpful? And so I see that as a companionship that is possible with an agent. And then the other bit, you talked a little bit about it as a friend, but I see it more as like this mentor-coach style relationship. So here's the thing, right? I'm not a gamer, but I try playing games once in a while. And so, I was playing this game, Stardew Valley, like, trying to work through it, and there was no way I was figuring out what I was doing. And so I turned on like the agent, the AI is looking at what I'm seeing, and I'm like, help me win. And it's like, sure, I can help you win. And that's the kind of mentor and companion relation I'm looking for in like a digital coach in this moment. And so then it suggested a bunch of things, and sure enough, those were very good ideas. But now, in that capacity, it's almost like something that you would do with a friend, and then so you kind of brought that analogy in here. But I think you can sort of see that relationship of like a mentor or a coach sort of also starting to grow.
Fascinating. It actually is an answer to my last question that I have here
Oh,
also is like, well, how do you see the perfect agent? But it sounds like you would like a coach that helps you bring the best yourself out in any situation in life, right?
yeah, I mean, and I think it depends on people, right? Sometimes you want the agent to just be there transactionally, get out of the way when it's done. Sometimes you want that mentor coaching relationship. I think in learning, especially, it can be a pretty powerful tool to almost have this agent watching over your shoulder, but like giving you just in time prompts. And so yeah, I see it as a sampling of relationships.
Fantastic. Okay, so I've been working on technology, mostly on hardware, and we have seen a lot of advances, like you mentioned, in processing platforms, displays, optics, cameras, many other eye tracking, you name it. On the other hand, we've seen massive advances in generative AI. So since the days of Google Glass, maybe 10 years ago, we have a completely different tool set or components to work with. What's still missing? What are some of the breakthroughs that you think we're missing, or are we there yet? Do we have everything we need?
There's always a hill climb, right? There's always as tall a hill as we can choose to look at. And so if we're sort of looking at this moment in time, there's definitely several places where we have to really make some strides. The first is in this is my priority list, real time awareness, real-time scene understanding, and relational awareness. So for example, where's my coffee cup relative to my laptop? Where's my laptop relative to some other object that I'm interacting with? Sort of having that spatial awareness and spatial understanding that can then be converted into very useful either communication back to me or to the model that now can act on your behalf or provide agency on your behalf, right? So I feel like that is one critical component. The second one that I see, and we didn't touch upon this before, is actually persistent memory, right? I gave this example like a little bit of, in jest about my usual, but I think there's many such examples which historically, like if you look at movies, they are my source of inspiration. Like when someone knows the other person's order, everyone's just like, wow, this was perfect. But there's a component of persistent memory that I think needs to evolve, right? Like we need to have agents that are sort of working with you, but also retaining the right level of understanding of what's relevant to you that they can then surface and bring back later. In terms of personalized memory relative to you, right? And then the last one I would say is also challenges with battery life. We didn't quite talk about this, but since you and I both like hardware, that would be another one that I would look at, right? Like what's a device that is so useful if it's sort of not available when you need it because well, it ran out of battery. So I feel like that's another big frontier, I would say, especially in the hardware space that I do think we need to keep pushing on.
All right, one more question. So, we've been talking about glasses. Everybody has a phone, but there's a whole ecosystem of devices. Johnny Ive's company was just recently acquired by OpenAI, who knows exactly what they're doing, maybe replacing the phone or the glasses. Are you envisioning a future where we have just one device that's sort of seamless, or is it going to be like this ecosystem of devices serving different purposes, or how do we envision this ecosystem?
Yeah, I mean, again, really, really appropriate question given that, I don't think we're going to have, wearables show up and then suddenly your phone disappears. It transforms overnight into a pumpkin. No, that won't happen. I do think these devices are here to stay. And it's when you sort of think about the agent as a hub that is, contextualizing each of these devices, that the benefits of the ecosystem or the benefits of the seams across these devices start to emerge. And to me, that's really beautiful, right? Because your glasses could be the perceptual and the personal component, because it's so close to your vantage point. It sees what you see, hears what you hear. It understands your persona, perhaps through your gaze, through your tone, that you might be a little bit excited, or you might be a little bit worried, or you haven't had much rest. Like, that's the personal and the perceptive components. The phone, I think, is graduating into this focused workflows, where if you wanted to send a quick response, you do it from your glasses. But if you want to think about something, you want to pull together a little bit more information, you might do that from your phone when you have a quiet moment, or you're sort of more in focus and flow. You might step into your phone as a device. Now, your watch is really interesting. I feel like the watch is more like the beeper of the future, right? Like, it's like the ticker that keeps going. It can give you these gentle nudges. And I tried this experiment where I said to myself, I'm going to use my watch in smart glasses. I'm going to see which one I prefer for, gentle nudges during the day. And what I found is I loved the haptic nudge on my, wrist. It acted as like this really soft thing, but I also knew it was there, and then it prompted me to do something. Now I did a thought exercise, like, what if I had like haptics buzzing all over my head? I certainly do not want that, right? And so this is where I feel like your watch is going to continuously be that heartbeat, right? In terms of monitoring your fitness, monitoring things that are vital to you, but also acting as that beeper when you need it, right? And so that's where I see the watch playing a pretty central role here moving forward. The other devices, I call them, like stay-at-home devices, like, your laptop and your tablet. Well, they'll continue to be at home. They'll be communal. They will exist. But like within the personal devices that you carry, I see these three sort of almost having a very symbiotic role. And then the agent almost acting as the hub, understanding which device to use at what time.
All right, I think we're almost out of time.
Oh, okay.
Maybe let me, end with one question that you partially answered already. Is like, when you think about hopefully the very near future, where we have these XR devices commercially available and being useful, what is one application or one task, or maybe this coach AI application, where you feel like, oh my God, this is going to be the one thing that's going to make me use this every day, that's going to drive adoption? Maybe it's the let me call it the killer app, the one function that this AI, agentic AI, is going to serve. Like, what is something that you think will drive this adoption?
For me, it's anything that can augment me to feel superhuman, right? And so I think it's memory for me, right? Like, that to me, you have context from like millions of documents. You have context from many moments of my life. Help me remember when I need it, right? And just being able to sort of interject at the right time with the right piece of information can make me feel pretty superhuman. And I would say that would be my favorite one. A lot of people do this today, actually, where they will create little agents based on some topic that they would like to always have at their fingertips. And then when they're queried by people, they might very quickly query the agent and have that information. And I've sort of seen people glow and feel really influential in that moment, where they're able to deliver an answer just in time. It's almost as if you have someone speaking in your ear, right? And I do think that can be pretty powerful. It also has the right form factor to deliver this type of message, but also capture so that it is in the future able to deliver this type of capability. So that would be my favorite one. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Okay.